Kia ora koutou. I have just watched the last episode of Dexter, season 8, final series, the finale. So I couldn't wait to do one of my marks or one of my Earley's late ND review series reviews. And I also wanted to particularly talk about Dexter's mental health or his neurological or cognitive presentation, to be a little bit more precise. So I'm going to mix the title a little bit with this one. So this will be part of my review series, but also kind of asking a bigger question, which means I might get some people who aren't used to the channel coming to join in, okay, which you're very welcome to, by the way. I didn't mean to sound hostile, but you need to know a few things, that I am neurodiverse, and the way I present this channel is not normal. It's slightly different. It's rough around the edges. It's a little bit more quirky. It's a little bit more conversational, and sometimes it's rambly, but in a good way. Okay, and this one is going to be particularly rambly. Okay, so if that's not your style, then let's part as friends. Go and watch a slick, well presented, rehearsed and beautifully edited video on a similar topic. But this is my thoughts as they unravel and as I unravel. And as per this series, where I've reviewed quite a few of the Dexter series already, I usually miss out the most important bits and end up sticking them in the description box or in a pinned comment below. So be ready for that. Okay, so where to start? There's so many things, and I think, I don't know, a rambly, unravelly kind of review is kind of quite apt, because it was quite a kind of a rambly, unravelly final series in lots of ways. And I'm not sure all the loose ends tied up. So I'm going to come on to the big question, by the way. I'm not ignoring that, but that will be the kind of the crescendo of this. Maybe the highlight, maybe not, of this video. But I want to talk about lots of different aspects of this the last series of the last season of Dexter, season 8. So, and I'll say these things while I think of them, really. It's not that I haven't reflected on this. It's just that, yeah, I'm neurodiverse, and this is the way I do shit. So, okay. Quinn. Okay, so right from the introduction of Quinn, back in series whatever, we know he's kind of this dodgy, he's got this dodgy past, or he's got some kind of smear or some suspicion or some cloud hanging over him. And there's various points where we kind of see a little bit of that. We see his kind of darker side. And I thought in this series that was going to kind of reach a nice, neat, tidy kind of conclusion. And it did seem as though, at one point it seemed as though Quinn murdered, I never remember names, by the way, but the young lad that Dexter was about to set up as a protege. It did seem like Quinn murdered him. Sorry, it did seem like Quinn murdered Dexter's new neighbour and kind of red herring love interest. And kind of and sharpened the door handle of that young lad's car to put his blood under her fingernails to set him up. And I thought, oh, blimey. So Quinn, you know, you're more of a psychopath than Dexter. I'm coming on to psychopaths in a bit. And I think that was the case, but it was never really made apparent, was it? So I'm not sure what was happening there. It feels like a loose end that never quite tied up. I mean, I would have quite liked to have seen Joey Quinn, you know, meet his comeuppance, really. So yeah, what was going on there? Was that just kind of, you know, left for us to draw that, left for the audience to draw that conclusion, without them feeling the need to kind of tie that up in a neat little bow? Yeah, I mean, yeah. But at one point, I thought Joey murdered the neighbour, but no. I mean, I think the series, it was very good at it's certainly keeping me guessing. I don't know if it kept anyone else guessing. I mean, I felt like I was watching a pantomime at various points, and I was kind of, shouting out behind you, because I thought Dr. Vogel was the brain surgeon murderer, the murderer that was cutting out pieces of brain. Because she was a psychopath. I thought, well, why is she so interested in psychopaths? She's a psychopath. She's a murderer herself. That's why she developed the code. That's why she set Dexter up. That's why she kind of, seems to have this kind of great love and respect for psychopaths. But no, credit to the writers. She was not the murderer. And even when it looked even more and more like when they found the hair and as a match to her DNA, I thought, yes, but I thought, but I did kind of think at the same time, oh, this is a bit of an obvious line. So that was interesting. What else? So much, really. Yeah. I think I became more and more puzzled by the character of Hannah as kind of time went on, really. What was the deal? Because she's, on one level she's supposed to be, she presents as this lovely person that Harrison loves, wants to be his mum, and she is lovely with him. But what was she doing with that billionaire? At the start, and what was the deal with poisoning Dexter and Deborah? Yeah. Odd one. I like the character of what's he called? Elway. I thought that was a good character. And Federal Marshal, good character. One of the things that this last series criticised for is having kind of, way too many plot lines going on. But I kind of didn't mind that because I knew it was the end, and in a way it kind of helped because I was kind of watching it from behind the sofa, really, because I'd heard a whisper that Deborah was going to die, and I wasn't looking forward to that. I also heard a whisper that the ending was quite unpopular and quite confusing. So I was kind of, wanting to see the ending and not wanting to see the ending. So all the action and the various intricacies that took place along the way were quite welcome from my point of view, because they kind of kept me interested and distracted from my kind of, my fears of the denouements. So those things. I like the character of Dr. Vogel. And I liked that, and this is me coming on to the question really that's in the title of this video. I liked the way that, she was kind of assuming that he was this regular kind of psychopath, but all the time kind of scratching her head and thinking, well, hang on, that's a bit unusual. That's not like kind of people like you, that's not, what's going on here. And I think that kind of takes us back to the point that all the way through, really, Dexter has not presented the character of a true psychopath, even though he has kind of believed that, and he's kind of fallen into some of the patterns that we would associate with that. But all the way through, really, he's not really a kind of a proper psychopath, and that's really interesting. Now, I haven't read the novel yet. I'm going to read the novel. It's the next thing I'm going to do, and I'll do a review of the novel. So the novel might tell me, well, hopefully will tell me a whole load more, and I might completely change my view. Okay, so this is just how I'm feeling now after watching the all 8 seasons of the TV series. Okay, so one thing that's quite interesting is a lot of people who are on the autistic spectrum are heavily identify with Dexter. And if they don't, then their friends and family say, hey, you're a bit like Dexter, which kind of poses lots of people with some anxiety because, not many people, it's quite alarming being compared to a serial killer, even if it's just a fictional character. So I think this is a worthy topic, really. Talking about this might actually reassure a lot of people. So I think if you played Dexter as a pure psychopath, he would have very few redeeming qualities. Now, the audience wouldn't empathise with him. Okay. Now that's kind of interesting because one of the most popular characters in film fiction is James Bond, who has all the characteristics of a psychopath. But James Bond is a hero, so he fights people who are worse than him. He fights the bad guys, and I think particularly the Daniel Craig Bond, for me, very difficult to empathise with. Very little personality. And I think the reason people do still enjoy the Bond films is because he's got such little personality. He's this blank slate. He's like an avatar. And I think the viewer can kind of become Bond. And also, as I just said, the fact that he's on the kind of the side of good, generally speaking. But Dexter, who is a serial killer, has to be very likable and has to have lots of vulnerabilities. Otherwise, the audience isn't going to stretch itself into empathising with a serial killer. So if you played him as a pure psychopath, it wouldn't work. So one of the interesting things about psychopathy and autism, and where often the two get a little bit kind of confused, and where there's a lot of confusion generally, is around empathy. And I don't think anyone has really got to the bottom of this. So there's different theories. This is about primary and secondary psychopathy, and some psychopaths not having any empathy at all. Some having empathy to the extent that they can understand and mimic and mirror the behaviour of non-psychopathic people, and sometimes actually use their empathy as a sadistic tool. Very confused. Lots of things that are written about this that don't seem that clear at all about kind of empathy. So, but I think generally speaking, the consensus would be that psychopaths lack empathy, or that they have a cognitive form of empathy but not an emotional empathy. So they can understand emotion, but not from a user's perspective, if you like, more from an outsider's perspective. And one of the big myths about autism is that autistic people lack empathy. That's often said. I dispute that. I think, I'm not talking about high functioning autism here. I think people with autism have a lot of empathy, but they don't always, because they misread social cues and they don't always read people very well, they don't read facial expressions, they don't always, and they can be very literal and black and white in their thinking, they don't always know when to apply empathy. So I'll give you a ridiculous example to try and illustrate that. By the way, I've done a whole series on neurodiversity and autism, all these kinds of things. I'm on the autistic spectrum myself. So, for example, a ridiculously overblown analogy to try and make the point about empathy and people with autism. Okay, so somebody with autism has gone through the experience of their pet cat dying and absolutely devastated and distraught, because often people with autism really love animals. And a friend of theirs reports to them that their dog died, to which they respond in a kind of seemingly callous, unempathic, unsympathetic way. And until somebody points out to them that the experience of this other person's dog dying would probably be very similar to their experience of the cat dying, and then it's like a penny drops, and they could be oozing in sympathy, okay, oozing in empathy, oozing in concern. It's like I think we have plenty of empathy. We just don't always get the cues to know when that should be activated, because often our experience is very different to neurotypical people. So somebody might experience something that for us would just not faze us at all. But for them, it could be deeply upsetting. But unless they spell that out, we're not necessarily going to get that. Okay, so I think the empathy thing, I could talk more about that, and I think I possibly have in other videos. But the general myth is that people on the autistic spectrum don't have empathy. That's how it's presented, or have paucity of empathy or a deficit in empathy. And psychopaths have a deficit in empathy. Also, a kind of maybe sometimes a sense of alienation, a sense of not understanding your own emotions, a callousness, as in not, which again is callousness, lack of empathy, same thing. So there's a kind of confusion, I think, between our understanding of psychopathy and our understanding of autism. So I think one of the interesting things is that Dexter presents throughout the series probably as more autistic than he does as psychopathic, even though he's supposed to be a psychopath. Or is he? Or is he? Because what I find really interesting, particularly when we were talking about Series 8, Dr. Vogel, you know, she's thinking, you're not the atypical psychopath, are you? And his character develops, he grows. So he's kind of like an autistic person in terms, is a late starter, a late starter at the table of romance and sex, as many people in the autistic spectrum are. Somebody that becomes more and more comfortable with sex, touch, intimacy, emotion, and his character grows and develops. And there is this kind of hint at the end that, you know, he's a very much changed person, and he's more interested in being with Hannah than he is with killing, you know, with making his final kill. He gives up his final kill. And interesting, the person that he was going to kill, what's his name? Saxon. Oliver, is it Oliver Saxon? Which sounds a bit like Oliver Sacks, doesn't it? The man, didn't he write The Man Who Mistook His Wife for a Hat? I wonder if that's deliberate. That character was really a purebred psychopath with a purebred psychopath backstory. Okay, and even the psychopathic stare. He looked a bit like Paul McGann with big starey eyes, didn't he? So that's what, you know, if Dexter was a pure psychopath, that's kind of what he would have presented like. So often, you know, I wonder, you know, what there's an interesting kind of subplot, really, unspoken, very much implicit and not explicit, of, you know, what really, you know, what is Dexter's mental health situation? Is he, you know, is he a psychopath? That's kind of, he's kind of set up as a psychopath, but there's loads and loads of opportunities where that's kind of challenged or questioned or knocked on the head, really. And more he kind of presents as somebody that's on the autistic spectrum. So this is really interesting. So I haven't got this kind of clever kind of answer for you. This, you know, I think, you know, as far as I could conclude about anything, I think that there is a deliberate move to put a big question mark over Dexter's mental health, and he is a character that changes and develops. And I think I didn't like the ending. I mean, I think I remember one of the other criticisms was that the ending was kind of rushed. Certainly, it was a sense of, I enjoyed the sense of urgency and drama with them trying to get away to Argentina, but yeah, it was a lot to process, you know, in those last few episodes. So first of all, he gives up his last kill. He feels he doesn't need to have that kill, because, you know, he's more interested in being with Hannah, and yet he still feels the need to either kill himself or fake his own death in order to protect the people that he loves, because he, you know, he realizes the consequences of his actions backfire on all the people that he loves the most. Well, if he's at the point where he feels that he no longer needs to kill and he's more interested in love, then that kind of doesn't really make sense. Now, I know that there was some controversy over the ending, and you know, I think originally it was written that he was, you know, he was just going to die, and then you see this kind of epilogue, which features logs, and as an autistic person, you know, I have to comment upon that. I can't let a single, even the shadow of a pun or a correlation or that kind of anomaly, I can't let it go. I kind of have to talk about it. It's a compulsion. Logging is in the epilogue, and he's kind of in a little cabin, not a log cabin, but a cabin. So what's that about? It's very confusing. But one thing that personally that I relate to, being on the autistic spectrum and being generally neurodiverse, is I kind of have the feeling, you know, similar feeling of Dexter, of feeling very different, finding it hard sometimes to understand other people, feeling uncomfortable around other people, difficulties with touch and knowing what to say at the right time, and all those kind of things. But also, and this is probably more to do with ADHD than it is to do with autism. There's something known as the ADHD tax, which I think I've touched on in other videos. Certainly it's talked about kind of quite widely. And the ADHD tax is that because mainly of the absent-mindedness, the impulsivity, the inclination to become bored easily, to make mistakes, to be absent-minded, all those things in aggregate actually usually end up kind of causing a very real financial cost to somebody with ADHD. So often people with ADHD, there's actually somebody's worked out, I can't remember the figure, but that they reckon that if you compare somebody with ADHD to somebody who's very similarly qualified, for example, in a profession to them, then the ADHD person is ridiculously financially poorer than the neurotypical, than their nearest neurotypical equivalent, and they call this the ADHD tax. The other thing is that ADHD people don't stick around so they don't last in jobs very long, and they don't last. This is statistical, okay? So I'm not saying that if you've got ADHD, this is going to happen to you, because like Dexter, we all adjust and grow and compensate, not by killing people, but by becoming more socially skilled and becoming more self-aware. So I think there is people with who are neurodiverse and particularly ADHD often don't last in relationships and have additional difficulties in relationships, and the potential is as well as if we create poverty and problems and debt that if we engage in a relationship, we will take the partners down with us. That we are kind of we're not really mad and we're not really bad, but we're dangerous to know, because some of our behaviours, our impulsivity, sometimes poor choices, and sometimes just not having our eye on the ball, creates this potential for financial loss and bumpy lifestyle. So therefore there's kind of a fear almost that we should kind of keep ourselves single, so that we don't inflict our own losses and our own ADHD tax on somebody else. So the thing where Dexter's kind of looking very alone and forlorn in the cabin, that definitely rang some resonant bells in my head. Sometimes the feeling that I've sometimes had, that I need to remain alone to protect potential partners, from the chaos that my neurodiverse brain might embroil them in, which is kind of quite interesting, isn't it? So I promised you an incoherent ramble, kind of stream of consciousness, free flow of ideas, based on having just watched the last episode of Dexter. I hope that's been interesting. I suspect that I will still be reflecting on this for sort of quite some time, so there may be a part 2, or I may even kind of ditch this video and start again from scratch with something that's a little bit more digestible, but I probably won't. But what I suspect I will do is read the novel Darkly Dreaming Dexter, which I've already loaded up on my iPhone, and do a follow-up video comparison, really, from TV series to novel. And I'm not sure how closely the TV series is supposed to follow the novel. It might just be something that inspired it, but I will I will get back to you with an Earley's late ND review of the novel. So be interested in your thoughts, and I suspect lots of neurodiverse people will hopefully be drawn to this subject, find it interesting. And I can say this because I'm neurodiverse myself. Lots of people who are on the autistic spectrum and have other similar conditions are often extremely rude. I've actually done a whole video series called Social Skills for Aspies and Askies, which is all about that. So if you are incapable of having an enjoyable discussion, even if, and particularly if you disagree, which might be interesting and enjoyable for both of us. If you're incapable of doing that without being rude or insulting, then please go away and don't leave any comments. But if you're capable, if you've got the self-awareness and you've done the personal development work to be a little bit more conscious of basically not being an asshole, then I would love to talk to you and have some discussion with you on this video below. So below, I mean in the comments below. I don't mean in hell or anything like that. So yes, let's have a chat. And I've got lots of other videos on various aspects of neurodiversity, so things like ADHD and pathological demand avoidance syndrome and other stuff, so you might be interested in those. And I've also done some more reviews of Dexter, and I've done other series reviews which are all in the same kind of rambling neurodiverse style. And if you've watched to this 26-minute point, you probably quite like that. You might be up for watching some more. I am not to everyone's taste. So yeah, I will be back. I mean, I'll be back with plenty more videos probably before then, but I will follow up this particular thread with some feedback on that novel, and I will catch you then. Right,